London in the 1700s was the heartbeat of a growing global empire and a city on the edge of a total transformation. At the start of the century, the population was roughly 600,000 people, but by its end, London would become the first city in the modern world to reach a population of 1 million. It was a place of extreme contrasts, of glittering wealth and desperate poverty, of grand new stone cathedrals and narrow, muddy medieval alleys. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings and prints to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways their original artists never could. By animating these static records of the past, we can better understand the scale and the atmosphere of a city that was quickly becoming the centre of the world. First, I want to talk about the gateway to the city. This view shows the original London Bridge as it appeared in the early 1700s. Unlike the bridges we're used to today, this was a massive stone arch structure topped with high, multi-storey timber houses and shops. In the foreground, you can see the dark, rushing water of the River Thames being forced through the narrow starlings or piers of the bridge. Because the gaps were so small, the water acted like a dangerous rapid, and shooting the bridge in a small boat was a terrifying ordeal that claimed many lives. By the mid-1700s, this bridge was a chaotic, congested street of its own. You would have heard the constant creaking of wooden signs, the shouting of shopkeepers, and the heavy thud of cartwheels over stone. The smell was a mix of river salt, horse manure, and the smoke from hundreds of chimneys rising from the houses, perched directly over the water. The main tension here was the constant gridlock. It could take an hour just to cross from one side to the other. Eventually, the danger of fire and the need for better traffic flow led the city to remove the houses in the 1750s. Remarkably, while this specific bridge was replaced in the 1830s, you can still visit the site today, where the modern London Bridge stands as a much simpler concrete descendant of this once crowded street over the water. This view shows the rising dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, which was finally completed in 1710. In the midground, the gleaming white Portland stone of the cathedral stands in sharp contrast to the soot-stained brick houses surrounding it. Designed by Sir Christopher Wren after the Great Fire of 1666, the cathedral was the ultimate symbol of a London reborn. In this reconstruction, we can see how the dome dominated the skyline, being the tallest building in the city for over 200 years. Daily life around the cathedral was a mix of the sacred and the secular. In the churchyard, printers and booksellers set up stalls, making this the intellectual heart of the city. You would have seen clergymen in black robes walking alongside merchants and students. However, the site was often thick with coal smoke from the millions of domestic fires in the city, which began to turn the white stone grey almost immediately. This building mattered because it proved London could rebuild itself on a grand Roman scale, moving away from the timber-framed risks of the past. Today, St. Paul's remains one of the most iconic sites in the world, having survived the Blitz of the 1940s to stand exactly where Wren placed it. This view shows the River Thames as a crowded, churning highway. By the 1700s, the river was the city's main artery. You can see hundreds of small rowing boats, known as wherries, darting between massive merchant ships returning from the West Indies or the East. In the background, the forest of masts creates a wooden skyline that rivals the church steeples. This was a place of constant movement, where watermen shouted insults at one another, a local tradition known as river wit. The air here would have been thick with the smell of tar, rotting fish, and the stench of the city's many open sewers flowing into the tide. The river was the source of London's wealth, but it was also a place of great danger and crime, with river pirates frequently stealing cargo under the cover of night. This trade fueled the rise of the British Empire, bringing tea, silk and sugar to the masses. While the river is much quieter today, this same stretch of the Thames remains the geographical soul of London, though the industrial docks have long since moved further downstream. This view shows the bustling square of Covent Garden Market. In the 1700s, this was a vibrant, messy open-air market surrounded by elegant neoclassical arcades. In the foreground, we see women carrying heavy baskets of vegetables on their heads and farmers unloading horse-drawn carts filled with fruit and flowers. The ground would have been littered with crushed cabbage leaves and straw. Covent Garden was a place where the social classes collided. By the 1730s, the area was famous for its theatres, but it was also a notorious red light district. You would have seen wealthy theatre-goers in silk stockings stepping carefully to avoid the mud and the beggars. There was a constant friction between the refined culture of the opera houses and the rough, sometimes violent life of the market workers. This area mattered because it was London's first planned square, moving the city toward a more organised urban design. Today, the market building you see when you visit was built in the 1800s, but the layout of the square remains exactly as it was in this 1700s view. By the mid-1700s, Fleet Street had become the centre of news and gossip. This view shows the narrow street lined with tall brick buildings, many of which housed the city's famous coffee houses. Inside these dimly lit rooms, for the price of a penny, men from all walks of life could read the latest newspapers and discuss politics or trade. You would have heard the constant rustle of paper and the low hum of intense debate. The streets outside were treacherous. Pedestrians had to navigate narrow raised pavements to avoid being splashed by the wheels of passing hackney carriages. Crime was a constant worry, with pickpockets operating in the crowded doorways. Fleet Street was essential because it was the birthplace of the modern press and the concept of public opinion. While the famous newspapers eventually moved out in the late 20th century, the street is still known globally as the ancestral home of British journalism, and several 1700s pubs still stand in the hidden alleys nearby. This view shows the ancient brooding walls of the Tower of London. In the 1700s, the tower was a strange mix of a fortress, an armoury, a royal mint and a prison. In the mid-ground we can see the White Tower standing tall against the sky. Along the riverfront, heavy cannons were positioned to defend the city or fire salutes for royal birthdays. Daily life here was strictly regulated by the yeoman warders. Interestingly, the tower also housed the royal menagerie, where visitors could pay to see lions, tigers and an elephant. The tension here was often political. During the Jacobite risings of 1715 and 1745, the tower held high-profile prisoners who were often led out to be executed on nearby Tower Hill. It represented the raw power of the crown. Today, the tower is one of the best preserved medieval and early modern sites in Europe, looking remarkably similar to how it appeared to a traveller 3 centuries ago. By the 1700s, London was overtaking Amsterdam as the financial capital of Europe. This view shows the courtyard of the Royal Exchange, a grand building where merchants from around the world met to trade. The architecture was classical and imposing, meant to inspire confidence. You would see men dressed in the fashions of Turkey, India, and the Americas, all negotiating prices for stocks and commodities. The atmosphere was one of high-stakes gambling. In 1720, this area was the site of the South Sea Bubble, a massive financial crash that ruined thousands of investors. The tension between the desire for quick wealth and the fear of total ruin was a defining feature of the era. The Royal Exchange mattered because it laid the foundations for the modern city of London as a global financial hub. Although the 1700s building was later destroyed by fire, the current Royal Exchange stands on the same site, maintaining the area's tradition as a place of international commerce. This view shows a more sombre and violent side of the 1700s, the Tyburn Gallows. Located at what is now Marble Arch, this was the site of public executions. In this reconstruction, we can see the triple tree gallows standing in an open field. On execution days, thousands of people would gather, creating a carnival-like atmosphere. Vendors sold snacks and last speeches of the condemned. There was a deep class conflict visible here. The bloody code of the 1700s meant that a person could be hanged for stealing something as small as a pocket handkerchief. The crowd often cheered for popular highwaymen, treating them like folk heroes, which created a constant headache for the authorities trying to maintain order. These public spectacles were eventually moved to Newgate Prison in 1783 as the city became more refined. Today, a small stone plaque set into the pavement near a busy traffic island is the only physical reminder of the thousands who met their end at this spot. This view shows the seat of power at Westminster. In the 1700s, the Houses of Parliament and Westminster Abbey sat near the river, surrounded by a maze of old wooden houses and muddy tracks. Unlike the grand Victorian Gothic building we see today, the 1700s Parliament was a collection of older, more modest medieval halls. You would have seen grand horse-drawn coaches carrying lords and MPs through the narrow streets, often getting stuck in the thick London mud. The air would have been slightly cleaner here than in the city, but the area was still prone to flooding from the Thames. This site was the heart of the newly formed Great Britain following the Act of Union in 1707. It was here that the laws governing a growing global empire were debated. While a massive fire in 1834 destroyed most of the buildings shown in this view, the Great Hall and the Abbey remain, anchoring the site to its 1700s roots. This view shows the elegance and fashion of the growing West End, specifically St James's Park. By the mid-1700s, the wealthy had moved away from the dirty, crowded city to these new, airy neighbourhoods. You can see men in powdered wigs and women in wide hoop skirts promenading along the Mall. The background is filled with the green of trees and the distant silhouette of Buckingham House, which would later become the palace. Daily life here was about seeing and being seen. It was a place of strict social etiquette, though the park was technically open to the public, leading to awkward encounters between the elite and the common people. The tension was social, the constant pressure to maintain one's status through clothes and manners. This westward expansion mattered because it created the two Londons, the wealthy West End and the industrial East End. Today, St James's Park remains one of the most beautiful public spaces in London, still used for the same purpose of walking and relaxing away from the city noise. By the late 1700s, the city was pushing eastward with incredible speed. This view shows the beginning of the industrial docks. Great warehouses were being built of dark brick to store the massive amounts of tea, sugar, and tobacco flowing into the country. You can see the heavy cranes and the hundreds of labourers carrying sacks on their backs. This was a place of hard, physical toil. The sounds of hammering and the smell of raw sugar and stagnant water filled the air. There was a growing friction here as the city grew too large for its old infrastructure, leading to the construction of the massive enclosed docks at the turn of the next century. This eastward growth was the engine of the Industrial Revolution, setting the stage for the Victorian era. Many of these 1700s warehouse foundations still exist today, often converted into luxury apartments along the river in areas like Wapping and Rotherhithe. Looking back at these scenes, it is remarkable how much of the 1700s city still dictates the layout of the London we know today. The 18th century was the moment London truly grew up, moving from a regional capital to a global powerhouse. When we look at these reconstructed views, the past feels less like a distant memory and more like a living, breathing world that is just out of reach. If there's another city, historical moment, or specific scene you'd like to see brought to life with AI reconstruction, please let me know in the comments. I love hearing your suggestions for where we should travel next. Again, thank you so much for watching.